All right, let's begin. So we are looking at the last 4 chapters of Shmuel, which are a unit in and of themselves, and that can be demonstrated by the structure. It has what's called a chiastic structure: A, B, C, C, B, A. And the A begins in chapter 21. The A is the sin of a king. The book is about kingship, and chapter 21 is about the sin of a king. The king who is called the sinner is Shaul. Shaul sinned, and his sin is, the chapter begins with a famine. 693 in this translation. Chapter 21 of 2 Samuel, 693. The sin is, first there's a famine for 3 years in the reign of David, and David inquires of God. There's a chumash here, yeah. And the answer is to David as to why there's a famine for 3 consecutive years. El Shaul v'el Beit Adamim al asher himit et hagivonim. So 2 things are said. It's concerning Saul, King Saul, and his bloody house, Beit Adamim, inasmuch as he killed the Givonim. And then the chapter explains, the text continues, the Givonim were not Israelites. They were the remnant of the Amori. And Israel had sworn to them not to harm them, not to kill them, not to harm them. And Shaul had violated the oath in his zealousness for God. So the text here actually recalls for us the story of the Givonim. We open up the Tanakh to the story of the Givonim. We know the story, remember the story. The Givonim tricked Israel. They pretended to be from a faraway land. They were concerned that Israel would have killed them otherwise. That's not clear that that's the truth, but that's another question. That's what they thought. And Israel swore to them they wouldn't harm them. And afterwards, lo and behold, they discovered they're the next door neighbors. What should they do? They took an oath, but the oath was made under false pretenses. So in the rabbinic tradition, we simply, either you go to a court and they are annulling the vow, or maybe you don't even need a court for that, just a mistake. In any event, the oath would be annulled. But in the Bible, that's not the case. The Bible doesn't know from annulling of vows. So what should they do? Some want to kill the Givonim, some don't want to kill the Givonim. At the end of the day, they decide to keep their vow. Oath, it's an oath. And they don't kill the Givonim. And this is the oath that Saul, King Shaul, had violated. We never knew this before. We discovered this for the first time in this chapter, chapter 21. He did it, B'kanato, Livnei Yisrael B'Yehuda. He is zealous for Israel and Judah. So David, having heard this, goes to the Givonim and he asks them, he says, what should I do to atone for this sin and to bless the inheritance of God? And the Givonim say to him at first, which is in verse number 3, verse number 4, we don't want any money. We don't want reparations, they say. We don't want any reparations. And furthermore, and Shaul himself is dead. So we have nobody to kill. That's what they answer. Then David insists, okay, so what do you want me to do? And the Givonim answer, they say, well, this person that tried to destroy us, etc., and prevented us from living in the land, give over 7 of his family, or from his children, literally, and impale them before God on the mountain of Saul, the chosen of God. And the king says, I will give you. That's the story. At which point, we are told that the king had pity on, or spared, Vayachmo, could mean either one, on Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shaul, inasmuch as David had sworn to Jonathan. He actually swore to Jonathan and to Shaul. He swore to both of them to protect their families. And Jonathan has a lengthy, imposes an oath, which David is accepting. And David also swore to Saul, Lo tashmid et zari, you won't destroy my family. And David swears. Chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, David swears. So David essentially has taken 2 separate oaths to care for the family of Yonatan and Shaul, he swears to as well. And so now, since he took that oath, and we know of one son that Jonathan has, namely Mephibosheth, David spares, it says, Mephibosheth on account of the oath, but he takes 7 other people, including here they're described as the 5 children of Michal. That's what we have in our text. Born to Adriel ben Barzilai HaMecholati, even though earlier in the book it says that Adriel is married to Meirav, the other one. Here it's Michal. And the 2 children of Ritzpah bat Aya, hands them over to the Givonim, who kill them, impale them, and they fall together. They all die together. And this happens at the time of the beginning of the harvest season. Fine. And then we're told that Ritzpah bat Aya, Saul's concubine, took a sackcloth, put it over the rock, and she waited till rain came, and she protected the bodies. And she didn't permit any animals to harm them, the birds, the animals. David is told what Ritzpah bat Aya did in verse 11 on page 694, at which point David takes the bones, collects the bones of Shaul and Yonatan from the people of Yavesh Gilad, who buried Saul and Jonathan in the last chapter of Shmuel Aleph, chapter 31, but he's buried in Yavesh Gilad. So it says they burned the bodies and buried the bones, and they fasted for 7 days. Yavesh Gilad was the town that Saul had saved. So they were grateful for that, and they went all night, and they retrieved the body off the walls of Beit Shan, and they brought the body back to Yavesh Gilad, and they buried the bones. So now King David goes and collects these bones, and he buries them in the ancestral grave of Saul and Jonathan, grave of Kish. He also gathers all the other bones of these 7, including presumably the 2 children of Ritzpah bat Aya and Michal, his 5 children. And he buries them together, and he commanded, the people did what David commanded. And the last verse, in verse number 14, Vayeyatar Elohim la'aretz acharei chen, and afterwards God responded to the plea of the land. That's the little story. It's a pretty horrific story that appears in chapter 21, the first part of the 6 pieces of the end of the book of Shmuel. It's one book, 6 pieces, A, B, C, C, B, A. This is the A, and this is the sin of the king. So the point I made last time is that, and already in the Gemara, they're sensitive to this. The Gemara in Yevamah is a long discussion of this whole story, and they're very sensitive to what is, to me, clear in the story. That first of all, you start with a question, There are a lot of questions here. But the trick is to ask the main question. When you ask the right first question, often the other questions follow suit, And the first question you have to ask here is very simply, if King Saul sinned with his bloody house, why is the punishment meted out during the years of David's reign? That's the first question. Why is King David being punished, as it were, his reign? And that's the punishment. Why is that the case? So the argument I presented last time is that actually the things that Saul is accused of, I'm not suggesting Saul's not guilty, but the things Saul is accused of is precisely the things that David has been accused of. There are 2 things he's accused of, Saul. His bloody house, Beit HaDamim, and we all remember when David leaves Jerusalem, forced out by his son Avshalom, so Shimi ben Gera comes to greet him on the way in Machanayim, and he says, Say ish hadamim v'ish ablial. Go out, you bloody man. God is repaying you for the crimes against the house of Saul. And now your own son is out to get you because you're a wicked person. And ish damimata, you're a bloody man. Now, at that point, one of his henchmen, Avishai ben Tzuria, was a hothead, says, let me chop that guy's head off. Why should he talk this way to the king? So David says to him, leave him alone. It's right here. So you saved you a seat over here. So he says, why should this? So David says, let him curse. If he's cursing me, God is telling him to curse. And furthermore, maybe God will see my suffering or see me, look at me, and restore me. So my understanding of that statement by David is, what David is saying, it's not what Yisurim Sha'ava, you know what I mean? It's not the innocent suffering. If God is telling him to curse me, then presumably God has a good reason. Because the fact of the matter is that what Shimei ben Gera says about David is 100% the truth. Now, you could say it's not totally true about the house of Saul, but the reason that David goes into exile in that chapter is because of the story of about Uriah and Bathsheba. And the prophet, Natan, the prophet, said to David, because you did this, because you killed Uriah Hachiti, and you took his wife, and you killed him with the sword of Ammon, 3 times the word cherev, and now the sword will not depart from your house. I will establish the evil from your own house. It's exactly what Shimei says. Your own son, your own house is out to get you. And the reader says, of course, every word Shimei says is true. And not only is it true, David knows it's true. 100%. That's why he can't kill him. So the point is, fine. So that's the story that's Ish HaDamim. Now, the fact of the matter is that the last story we hear about David, which is the 2nd chapter of Kings, because the 2nd chapter of Kings, see, many people are claiming that the book of Samuel, that these 4 chapters don't belong. Someone threw them in at the end. They're just an independent unit that was placed at the end. But the real end of the book is actually 2nd chapter of Kings, because in 2nd chapter of Kings, that's where David's kingship is established. Now, David is a king, but he doesn't have kingship until he has succession. Succession only happens in chapter 2 of Kings, when Shlomo takes over, gets rid of all the enemies, the adversaries, political enemies, or whatever it is, and then the kingship of David is established. So the argument advanced by many, when I say advanced by many, one says it, the other just follows suit, basically. But the point is, the argument advanced by many of these scholars is that that's the true ending to the book. That it derives from a deep not understanding of the book of Shmuel. They are correct, by the way, that's an ending to the book. There's no question. But the book has 2 endings. This is a very important point. The book has 2 endings. And it's not the only story that has 2 endings. We have another story in the Bible that also has 2 endings, and they're parallel to this. And not only is that parallel to this, the Shmuel story is based on the other story. It's actually based on it. And when you see it, it's so obvious. That's what's funny about this. You'll see it's obvious. We'll get there. In any event, that's number 1. Number 2, the violation of the oath. Well, Shaul violated the oath. And I would say, by the way, that I think the narrator is somewhat sympathetic to Shaul. Because, first of all, you have to remember that oath they took was not clear to many people that the oath should actually be kept. There was an internal dispute whether or not the oath should be kept. Okay. They paskined that it has to be kept. Fine, whatever it is. But, and that's, so Saul does the wrong thing. He violated Shvua, and then Shiva are killed. Sheva and Shiva are related. But it is interesting to note that when it says that Saul killed the Givonim, it puts it in terms of Bekanato, in his zealousness for Israel and Judah, which is not a negative thing, I think. So the point is, yes, it was a mistake. Yes, it's a sin. Yes, it's Ish HaDamim. Okay. He killed people. Beit HaDamim. This kind of corporate collective guilt in the Bible. All that is true. But it's not the same as sleeping with your general's wife and then having him murdered afterwards. It's not the same thing. There's no higher motive over there. So my point is that actually, it's a good example of the artistry of the book. The sin is Saul's sin. But David, as it were, has committed similar sins. And more than that, actually, if you think about it, he says, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. Why is he asking them what to do? His job as king is to make justice, to impart justice. Tzedakah or mishpat. Keeps asking him, don't do this, don't do that. What should I do? And then he hands them over. He decides who dies, which is very problematic to decide who dies, even if the judgment is so. But the interesting point is, and the Gemara noticed this already, that what's interesting in the story and fits right in, is that after David has the 7 killed, there's still a famine. The famine is not stopped at all after David kills or has killed these 7 descendants of Saul. By the way, the idea of killing Mephibosheth for this, who is obviously not capable of killing anybody, and he's totally altruistic, strikes me as. I think there is a hidden critique, but the point is, as the Gemara notes very well, the famine stops when they bury Saul and Jonathan. That's when the famine stops. And I would say something else which is interesting about the artistry of the book. It's very important when you read anything. And Tanakh is this way. The narrator, the book gives us information. It's always interesting to take note when the information is given, because that's very significant. And over here, we're told something that we all knew, but it never registered with us. Namely, that after Saul is killed on Mount Gilboa, and the Philistines take his body, kidnap his body, and mutilate his body, and mock him, and David has a beautiful eulogy for him, he's buried on the other side of the Jordan River. He's buried in Yavesh Gilad. And if there's anything in the Bible that's significant, it's being buried in the ancestral tombs. That's very important. So in point of fact, and that's what the Gemara notices. Gemara has a drush, which is a drush, but it's getting some truth. Why is there a famine? El Shaul v'El Beit HaDamim. Saul in the bloody house. So the Gemara says, the bloody house of Saul. That's Beit HaDamim. What do you mean Saul in the bloody house? And Saul, who wasn't buried properly, who wasn't eulogized properly. That's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara picks this up. And it actually, you read it, it sounds that way. I added, just one second, I'll take some. I also added last time that if you look at the other 5 sections, there's A, B, C, C, B, A. There's 6 things. The last 5 are just about David. They have nothing to do with anybody else. It's just David. So it is possible that the envelopes, the A and A prime at the end of it, are the sins of kings, sin of Saul, sin of David. But it works very well if the sin of Saul is also the sin of David. And I'm not going to get into it again, but not keeping oaths is one of the hallmarks of David in the book of Samuel. He never actually keeps his oaths. He never actually violates the oath. He just never keeps it. In other words, the last story, Shimei ben Gera, David's about to die, and the last words in his mouth are, Shimei ben Gera, when I left Yerushalayim, went to Machanaim, he gave me a terrible curse. I swore I wouldn't kill him. But you're a smart kid. It's a shlomo, but you'll figure out a way to bring his head, his bloody head to the grave. B'dam Sha'ol. Those are the last words. And of course, the last words David confirms that what Shimei ben Gera said is actually true. He gave me a terrible curse. What did he say? He said, I'm a bloody man. Terrible thing. Make sure you bring his head down to the grave in blood. The last words. Now, of course, the point I want to make, and I'll take your comment, is that the book, that's the 2nd chapter of Malachim. I assume it's the same writer. The book tells us David's last will and testament. There are 2 pieces to it. One is keep the Torah, obey the mitzvot, be devoted to God. That's one part. And the second thing is kill Yoav, kill Shimei, and be so those are 2 different things. The narrator wished the narrator could have reversed the order. Could have had David saying, listen, son, it's a tricky business, you know what I mean? Business that we chose. This is the way it is, you know? Got to get rid of your enemies, otherwise they're going to get you. It's a necessary evil. And now let's get to the important things. Keep the mitzvot, obey God, the Torah, be devout, and then David died. No. That part, which is formulaic, he says in the beginning. Then he gets down to the nitty-gritty, and the last words in the text are Dam Sha'ol, which I believe even plays off Dam Sha'ul. And the point is, so there's no, this is not a book that feels constrained by any way to present these characters in a positive light. Now, it's mixed, because that ending, which is, I would say, the reality of the kingship, that's a messy ending. But there's another ending, which is the ending that we have, which is very different. That's the point I want to make. We'll get to it. Yes, my friend.
I just wanted to ask about Shaul violated the oath.
Yes.
Oath or the psak? Because the oath was not clear. Because
the oath was the psak, because the oath was they did swear not to harm them. They took an oath. The question is the oath valid? In the rabbinic tradition, it's not valid because it was under false pretense. That's Hataras Nedarim, Kol Nidre, Shvueh. It's not valid. But the Mishnah itself says in Chagiga, famous Mishnah, the Het Nedarim Porchin Ba'avir. The idea that you can actually undo a vow or an oath floats in the air, and by that they meant it has no basis. It has no basis in the Tanakh. We don't have a situation, bar one, where somebody takes an oath and doesn't keep it. The exception is in the book of Samuel when Saul took an oath to kill Jonathan, and the people don't let him do it. The people stop him. How can you kill your son Jonathan? He's responsible for the victory. In any event, so the psak, actually, the determination was made by Yoshua. We got to keep the oath. But there was a whole dispute. So Saul violated that. I'm not suggesting the text condemns him. There's no doubt. But on the other hand, I don't think he's the main character of the story. That was the point about chapter 21. I thought we'd take a look at the other piece of the other side of it, which is 20. Yes, Alan.
In the end, David hands over Mephibosheth.
In the end, he does not hand over Mephibosheth. He hands over a different Mephibosheth. There's two Mephibosheths, and that's probably not an accident. No, we never heard of the other Mephibosheth. We don't know Michal has any children. Let's start with that. Nor is she married to Adriel HaMecholati. Michal, it says, has no children. Now we discover that, see, the story of Michal, we can't get to all of the book of Samuel, but the point is that in the chapter 18 of 1 Samuel, that's when Saul wants to kill David. So he wants to kill David by marrying David off to one of his daughters on condition that he fight the wars of God, to be a Ben Chayil. That's the first condition. So I explained. The first condition is you can marry my daughter Meirav. The people said it'd be in the Goliath story that the king has promised to give his daughter to the one who kills Goliath. We never hear Saul say this, but the people report that. So Saul turns to David. He wants to kill him. He says, you can have my daughter Meirav, but be a Ben Chayil, be a valiant soldier. So David says, no, it's not for me. I'm not worthy. He delays. And then Meirav is married to Adriel HaMecholati. That's mentioned over here. Then Michal loves David, it says. And Saul likes that. So he sends people to talk to David again. Listen, marry Meirav. And David said, how can I marry her? I'm not highly esteemed, and I'm poor. So David has the business of being poor. That's a segue for Saul to say, forget dowry. Just kill me 100 Philistines. So David does. David kills 100 Philistines, and then he marries Michal. So Saul's plan was thwarted. Saul thought in fighting the Philistines, they would kill him. That doesn't work. David kills the Philistines, and David, it says, and the matter suited David, and he married Michal. So you have without getting into that whole story, which is a very interesting story, you hinted at it. David refuses the first offer, because the first offer to be a Ben Chayil is never ending. Be a valiant warrior. To be a Ben Chayil means to be in a place of danger. Eventually, they're going to get you. That's what David thinks. So therefore, he doesn't want to be a Ben Chayil. So he says he refuses under the whatever. He refuses. I'm not worthy. Who am I? Blah, blah. The second one, though, is defined. It's 100 Philistines. David goes out and kills 200, actually. In the Masoretic text, he kills 200. Because David's interest in the story is to be the son-in-law of the king. But he has no interest in Michal or Meirav, neither one. But you're the son-in-law of the king. And he was anointed king. So you're in line for the kingship. And therein lies one of the deep, deep themes of the book of Shmuel. Makes it a great book. And that is when the personal, the relationship of the personal and the political. Because for David to become king, he doesn't wait around to be king. He waits till God okays it. He waits till Saul dies. But he's building his empire before that. He has his army, he has his priest, he has his general, he has his men. and he has a link to the throne now. That's his interest. So that's why he marries Michal at the end. Saul's interest is to kill David, to turn one of his two daughters into widows at a very young age. That's Saul's interest. It's a terrible story, actually. And the treatment of Michal throughout the book is along the same lines. Saul takes Michal away. She marries somebody else who loves her. David takes her back. The guy's crying. It's a terrible story, but so that's the story of Ben Chayil. By the way, since you raised that point, that's right. Exactly. And by the way, I want to tell you that I've taught the book of Samuel, I think three times. Twice in Drisha, once at a law firm. And we got to the story of the end there with, David telling you got to kill this one, kill that one, all this business. And someone said to me, sounds just like the Godfather. And it does actually sound like, to the extent I wondered if it was written with the story in mind, actually. So you know something? Let me write Mario Puzo and ask him if he based it on Shmuel. That week he died. He died that week. We'll never know. He died that week. So we don't know. But some of the parallels are, I don't know if it's based on it, but but that's the similarity. It's a similarity. It's the personal and the book of Shmuel makes a very deep point about this, which is you can't totally separate these things. It's not just business because it's all personal and business. And the fact is, for the story of Saul, who wants to give his daughter in marriage to David to get him killed, and it's unbelievable actually. But David is using her as a step to the throne. And therein lies, that's part of what makes this book extraordinary. It's very interesting. So, by the way, since you mentioned that Ben Chayil business, I will tell you one thing that I believe to be true. I'll take 2 minutes to say this. I can't. Just take too long. So, no, just. Okay, I'll tell you this. The story of David and Bathsheba. See, David and Bathsheba is the story where David does exactly that. He right? David sends someone into battle to get him killed, right? And then, of course, he takes his wife. But the point is, in the case of David, he actually succeeds. He has the enemy kill the one he wants to kill him himself. See, Saul wants the other to do what he wants to do himself. So this way, it's fine. He died in battle. Maybe we'll give him a hero's funeral or something. But Saul doesn't succeed because David sees through it, but David does succeed. So what's interesting is that when David sends Uriah into battle, and he sends him into battle, he calls him from the battlefield on the pretext of he's a scout to give me information about the battle. How's it going? How's it going? How's it going? And the text never tells us what Uriah says because it actually doesn't matter what Uriah says. And then when he gets to David, wonderful report. When do you go rest up for a while? He wants to send him back to his wife. And this way, nobody will ever know who the father is. The problem is that Uriah doesn't go. He refuses to go. Not because he suspects David. That's a bad mistake. There's no evidence on any level he suspects David. He's Uriah. He's God's light. He's the opposite of David who acts baseter. And the point of the deep point is that the narrator has no reason to suggest that Uriah is suspicious because that would put David in a less bad light. And the only interest the narrator has is to put David in the worst possible light. In any event, so David finally, then he gets him drunk. He still won't go home. So he gives him a note to bring to Yoav, like a secret note. Basically, the note says, bring Uriah to the battlefield, withdraw from him, and let him die. That's what the note says. Kill me. And he's carrying his own death warrant. He's carrying it himself. And David knows he'll never open it because he's a good soldier. Takes his commands. He's on it. He'll never open it. Anyway, what's interesting is, and this is, I got to get back to the chat here, but what's interesting is that Yoav doesn't exactly do that. What it says that Yoav does, now this is what I believe is the most plausible reading. No one else says this. Let me just tell you straight up. They all say the opposite. I used to say the opposite too. What Yoav does, it says he put him in a place where he knows that Bnei Chayil are there. He puts him in a place where Bnei Chayil are there. It says the people from the city came out. They're besieging a city. And they killed many of Israel. And Uriah Hittite also dies. Then Yoav has to give reports. He said he has a messenger who gives a report back to David, and he says to the messenger, listen, when the king says what happened in the war, the king's going to get very angry. The king's going to say, why did you get so close to the wall? Don't you remember that Avimelech, Gideon's son, who declared himself king, he was killed by a woman who threw a millstone from the wall. Why did you get too close to the wall? And say to David, yes, even Uriah the Hittite died. Gam Uriah Hittite made. Now, what is assumed by everybody I ever read about the book of Samuel is that, in fact, in order to kill Uriah, he doesn't want to just kill Uriah by himself because he'll see it. So he has actually many people die. That Yoav is killing many people, puts them near the wall, which is very dangerous, and so in order to cover up the death of Uriah, he kills others. So in effect, he's responsible not just for the death of Uriah, but for the death of other soldiers who have to be sacrificed, as it were, in order to kill Uriah. Now, I don't believe that's the pshat. I would tell you straight, I don't think that's right. I don't think, first of all, it doesn't fit with the Yoav of the book of Samuel. He never endangers his troops, ever. It doesn't fit with him. Furthermore, he has this whole business of, don't get too close to the wall. They can throw things on you from the wall. But in the story, it says, Vayetzu Anshe Ha'ir. The people of the city came out and they attacked. Furthermore, it's not even clear to me who the Bnei Chayil are. Are the Bnei Chayil the people in the city? So I believe the better interpretation is this. It's not that he goes out to battle and simply withdraws from Uriah and has him killed, nor is it that he simply puts his troops in unnecessary danger and they die. But rather, he puts him where Bnei Chayil are. Bnei Chayil is exactly the term that Shaul used for David. Marry my daughter, but be a Ben Chayil. And David knows that a Ben Chayil, okay, maybe I won't die today or tomorrow. But eventually, if I'm a Ben Chayil, he's sent on the most dangerous missions, they'll get you someday. So I think what Yoav does is he simply puts him in a place which is dangerous. But there are soldiers there. In every army, there are soldiers in more dangerous places. He puts him in the most dangerous place. That's what he actually did. But the story is even more cynical because the point is, after Uriah dies, Yoav says, listen, the king's going to be angry that many died, right? The king's going to say, you got so close to the wall. Don't you know how dangerous that is for armies to get close to the wall? A king once died when he came close to the wall because a woman threw a millstone on him, which the subtext is, it's too dangerous. Kings should be too close to women or too close to walls. With David, it wasn't a wall, it was a roof. But, that's one thing. But the second point is, many are going to die, but then you'll be able to placate the king. Tell him Uriah the Hittite died also. Notice what Yoav is really saying is, our king, our beloved commander-in-chief, doesn't give a damn about anybody except himself. So you tell him many soldiers died, tell him Uriah Hittite died. But that's the subtext. Now, not that the message doesn't understand this, but we understand it. So Yoav doesn't actually just have them killed for nothing, nor did he put them in a place where they can throw things off a wall. It doesn't even mention they came too close to the wall. He said they put them around Anshe Chayil. But Yoav's justification, what he's really saying is, don't worry about it. Many died, but tell him Uriah died. It's going to be okay. He's not going to work, which is exactly what happens in the story. Exactly what happens. When it says, the sword eats this way, the sword eats that way. That's what he says. In any event, that's the Ben Chayil. My point being that the Ben Chayil is used in two stories. It's used with Shaul and David. Be a Ben Chayil. David refuses. He sees through that. But then Yoav places Uriah where there are Bnei Chayil. And that's very dangerous. And die. The Bnei Chayil die. Not just Uriah. It's a dangerous place. It's a siege. It's dangerous. That place is more dangerous. It's the most dangerous. So he happened to die. If he didn't die that day, he'd die in 2 weeks, die in a month, whatever. That, I believe, is the situation of, in any event, that's a digression that we get. Yes?
With all of these ghastly stories we're reading
Yes.
about these people, we're leading our people.
Yes.
Why do we revere David and some of these others?
Well, there are two things about David. First of all, you have to remember.
He wrote lovely poems.
Well, 1 second. There are different Davids. We are studying the David of Samuel. Now, even in Samuel, we'll see there's some very wonderful idealistic sides to David. But the David that we revere, okay, there's the David, for example, of Chronicles. The book of Chronicles, which is a much later book, it reflects some earlier traditions, but it's a later book. The book of Chronicles doesn't have David and Bathsheba. It doesn't have Avshalom. It barely has Shaul at all. It doesn't have Adoniah ben Chagit. It has none of those stories. No Amnon and Tamar. None of that stuff. So there's a very different picture of David. And that's a picture that's a different picture of David. There are different Davids. Then there's the David of Psalms. Then there's the David of the Midrashim. There's the David who defends Israel. I mean, he's amazing, actually. He's our defender. Little David defends all of us. So there are many Davids, okay? And our prayers of Shirei David Avdecha, our davening is David's language. So I don't believe that one can reconcile the different Davids. I don't believe that to be the case. I think the attempt to say to explain one text in the light of the other, I think is wrong-headed, because I don't think you can reconcile them. I think the David of Divrei Hayamim is a different David. And not only that, it can be demonstrated pretty clearly that Divrei Hayamim sometimes actually changes the language of Shmuel. On several occasions, they actually change the language or leave out things. The same thing is true of Shlomo. The Shlomo of Divrei Hayamim is a wonderful, perfect, devout servant of God. The Shlomo of Kings is a different story, much more complex. The first thing you hear about, he married Pharaoh's daughter, etc., etc. So there's all kinds of, he's a tyrant, actually. People complain after his death, his father was a tyrant. You know, there is an opinion in the last parak of Sanhedrin. It says that there are 4 kings who have no portion in the world to come. The Gemara in the first daf says, some say there's a 5th king who has no portion in the world to come, King Solomon. Now, the Gemara, that's one opinion. Not a known opinion, but it's right there in the Gemara. That hardly is it's an accolade of Solomon. But in Divrei Hayamim, in Divrei Hayamim, David and Shlomo, there's no question who's going to succeed David. It's Shlomo from early on, and they work together. In Divrei Hayamim, David, most of his time is on the Beis HaMikdash. He also composes Psalms. He has a day job. He's the king of Israel. That's a small deal. The main focus is on the Psalms and the Mikdash, and he works with Shlomo together. That's a very different picture. So they're 2 radically different pictures. The reason people love the book of Shmuel, apart from being it's an amazing piece of work, is precisely because it's a book where the writer has 0 constraints. It makes no attempt on any level to apologize, none whatsoever. And I would say more than that, very few people come out clean out of the book of Shmuel, including Shmuel doesn't either. So it's messy, and most of them end up simply dead, killed. Now let's start the class. Now let's start A prime. So A, B, C, C, B, A. So the second A, is the last chapter of Shmuel as we know it, which is chapter 24 of 2 Samuel. In this translation on page 701. It's one of the great chapters of the Bible, without question. And it's a chapter that we should be familiar with in a sense, because the parallel chapter in Divrei Hayamim, which is not identical but very similar, that chapter in Divrei Hayamim, one of the verses is part of the Seder. It's in the Haggadah, actually, and we'll see about that. Anyway, the chapter begins this way. Vayosef af Hashem lacharot b'Yisrael. God, see, they translate, the anger of God flared up again, or continued to flare against Israel. So the question is why?
Sounds a little like Judges.
Right, but in case of Judges, it comes after a sin. So Rashi says here on the spot 4 words. Lo yodati alma. I don't know why God is angry. The chapter 21, we know why. David asked God, why are you angry? Saul in the bloody house, the Givonim. So we have an answer. But over here, this anger of God continued to flare. Why is the anger of God flaring? And let us assume, because this is how we were brought up, and this seems to be our tradition, that this is the last chapter of the book. This is the last chapter of Samuel. So last chapters are very important. So let me make a suggestion as to why God is angry over here. God is angry over here, or rather, the book, in the last chapter of the book, returns to the basic question of the book. And the basic question of the book, the core question of the book of Shmuel, is about kingship. Good thing or bad thing? We know that Shmuel thinks bad thing, and he makes that about as clear as you can make it, and he actually tries to undercut it. What we don't know is what is God's position, or what is the book's position. We do know that the way the people asked for a king was wrong, because they asked for a king like all the other nations, and that can't possibly be good. That's certainly no good. So the question is, what about kingship? People asked for it in the wrong way, so God continues to be angry. It picks up with chapter 21, which is the sin of a king. And the sin of the king in chapter 21 was carrying out your mission, even though it conflicts with an oath, a shvuah. A shvuah, some of you take in God's name. Well, tishavu b'shmi lashakeh, right? Don't take my name in vain. A shvuah has either explicitly or implicitly God's name. So when the king is doing something, killing the enemy in violation of an oath, he's putting his own interests or Israel's interests ahead of God's interests. And that's the sin of chapter 21. And now in chapter 24, we're going to have a parallel story where the king will act in contradiction to what God represents. Yes?
That's a very strong statement about that the kinos is the kinos for the wrong element. Because in kingship there are two elements. One is the dedication to God, and that God has chosen him, and the other is that he's of the people.
Right.
But the kinos needs to be on the God side, and the Shaul it's clearly.
That's right.
On the people's.
That's correct. I didn't want to get into that whole issue, but I will point out to you that the story that is referenced in chapter 21, when they say impale them before God, is the story that appears in the Chumash with Pinchas. That's the story of Hoka Neged Hashemesh is Pinchas. Now, it's not clear whether they actually did it or not, but there, the one who saves the day is Pinchas, B'kanoet Kinoti, Lashem. So there, actually, the Kinah is Lashem, and that saves the day. But in chapter 21, the Kinah was for the people opposed to Hashem. So your point is very well taken. I don't want to go there. There's more to say about it, but that's an interesting point. Anyway, Vayosef af Hashem, this is the chapter that's not simple, and it has a parallel in Chronicles. So let's start this chapter. Vayosef af Hashem lacharot b'Yisrael, Vayoset et David bahem leimar, leichmenei et Yisrael v'et Yehuda. God, it says literally, incited David against them, saying, go and count Israel and Judah. So what it sounds like when you read the verse, you say to yourself, it's not David's fault. God is inciting David to do this. Now the question is, when it says God incites David to do it, is the purpose of that to exclude David from any guilt? Or is the purpose not to exclude David from guilt, but rather to make the point that the primary anger is not against David. The primary anger is against Israel. Lacharot b'Yisrael. But the text doesn't think that David's off the hook either. So Vayoset against God wants to get them, but that's not to suggest that because it said God incited David, that David doesn't bear responsibility. And if you think that's very strange, it's not that strange. Or maybe it is strange, but we have another example of it. Exactly. The story of Paro, where there it says several times, Vayechazek Hashem et leiv Paro, but no one ever suggested that Paro doesn't bear responsibility and guilt. Obviously, Paro is God's enemy. But nonetheless, it presents it for whatever reason in terms of, sometimes it says Vayechazak leiv Paro, he hardened his own heart, and sometimes Vayechazek Hashem et leiv Paro. But when God is acting in an active way, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people against whom God is acting don't bear responsibility. In the story over here, when you read the story, it's clear that David at least understands that he's guilty, because that's the heart of the story. It's David's understanding and confession that he is responsible. And when I talk about confession, I want to introduce chapter 24 by pointing out what comes before chapter 24. What comes before chapter 24 is chapter 23. And chapter 23 is a list of David's strongmen, the Giborim. David has the valiant Giborim, about 37 of them. Now, there's a parallel list in Chronicles. Chronicles is written probably 700 years later, something like much later. It's a later book. But that doesn't mean that the material in Chronicles is later. In other words, you could have a text that's later, but it reflects earlier traditions. You have this question, for example, in terms of Gemara, the Mishnah versus the Tosefta. The Tosefta obviously is later than the Mishnah. It's called the Tosefta. It's the additions. But it's not always clear that the Tosefta, that the material in the Tosefta is later material. You can have a work that's redacted or written later even, but reflects earlier sources. So when you're learning Mishnah, Tosefta, you have to see, usually the Mishnah is in fact earlier, but not always. Sometimes the material. Now over here, in the list of strong men of David in Chronicles, which is chapter, I forget which chapter it is, but it's there. There's a long list. One of the strong men is Uriah Hittite. Uriah Hittite is one of the Giborim. So in the list in Chronicles, if there are 37 of them, he's 30. But in the book of Shmuel, he's 37. He's listed at the end over here. So if you ask yourself the question, which is the older list? The one in Samuel or the one in Chronicles? I suggest that the older list is Chronicles. But that the book of Shmuel moves Uriah down. Because when you read the Uriah Hittite, Shloshim v'Shiva, and the next verse, God was angry against Israel, and God incited David against them. Not that God is angry about the story of Uriah Hittite. Some people say that. That I don't think is correct. But the book wants us to recall sins of the king, the sins of David, and I think the confession of David. Because chapter 24 contains a great confession. But we have to think about the confession of David in chapter 24 and the confession of David in the story of Uriah Hittite. They're not the same confession, as we will see. In any event, this is verse number 1. Now we have 2. Vayomer HaMelech, page 702, El Yoav, Sarah Chayil Asher Ito. David spoke to Yoav, Sarah Chayil Asher Ito. The officer, the Sarah Chayil, the chief, the military officer. What do you mean Asher Ito? What does that mean, Asher Ito? What? He's with him. What do you mean he's with him?
Not always.
David tried to get rid of him on 2 occasions. And this is another evidence. The story is related to what comes before. Because in chapter 20, he fires Yoav. He replaces him with Amasa. A piece of stupidity, but that's what he does. And Yoav nonetheless kills Amasa and saves David. In the case of Avshalom, he instructs Yoav not to kill, and the generals not to kill Avshalom. Yoav kills Avshalom anyway, because he thinks that's the right thing to do for the people. I think the narrator takes the side of Yoav. In any event, Sarah Chayil, the one who happens to be with him, he's not always with him. Depends on David's mood, but he's with him now. So he speaks to the general who's with him, and he says to him, Shoot na b'chol shivtei Yisrael midon v'yad Beersheba upikdu et ha'am. Shoot na. Circulate, right? Circulate around the people so that, and count them. I will know the number of the people. It's interesting, by the way, just parenthetically, that in the parallel story in Chronicles, which is chapter 21 of Divrei Yamim Aleph, so there it has a slightly different version. And there, it begins with, on page 1931, it says, Vayamod Satan al Yisrael. Satan, Satan. Vayaset et David limnot et Yisrael. A Satan arose, an adversary, Satan, and incited David to count Israel. Now, what's interesting is this.
Are they allowed to do that? Change God into Satan? And that's subversive in most literary way.
I probably think they're putting God in a better light. What do you mean? Yeah.
Well,
But
of course, they're saving him from inciting David.
Here's
Why don't they do that in the Paro story again and again and again? Because they don't care about Paro being saved. Let him be damned. But they care about David's image and nefesh. But this is nuts.
so there's no they. It's not the same book, but
Obviously, I'm using it in a literary sense. Well, they're saving David. They're saving David's skin. Chronicle doesn't want to present David in any negative light.
that's true. Chronicles presents David for the most part. That's a story that appears. No, in that story, David does sin even in Chronicles, but there are differences there. But I have a different point I want to make about Satan. This is pure speculation on my part. Speculation. But I wonder about this business of there are two versions. In the first version, God is inciting David against them. And David instructs his general that happens to be with him to circulate around the nation. The language is, shoot na b'chol shivtei Yisrael. To go and circulate around shivtei Yisrael. Now the point is, I'll get to it. I'm going to get to it. Exactly. 1 second. Satan appears in the later books of the Bible. The most prominent place it appears is in the beginning of the book of Eov. And in the beginning of the book of Eov, all the angels come to God to visit God. And God asks Satan, where have you been? Mishuta aretz u'mimitharech ba. Now, of course, Mishuta aretz is there a play on the word Satan. Very often in the Bible, the shin and the sin play off each other. So the Satan is shut, which is sat, basically, right? And so what's interesting is we have two stories. In our story, we don't have Satan, but we have shoot. In the other story, you have Satan, but don't have shoot. So I wonder about this, whether there's what they call an Ur story, whether there was some other story, maybe Arol, who knows. And these two versions are playing off, because shoot actually reminds us of Satan. It doesn't say Satan. And the other has Satan, but not shoot. So I wonder whether actually there's some other story, speculation, pure speculation. There's some story, some tradition. And the way these things work is, maybe there are 100 traditions, and different books and different narrators, for their own purposes, pick and choose what they wish to choose. In any event, David commands Yoav to count the people. That I should know the number. Now, in each version, Yoav refuses. Initially, he refuses. He says to David in verse number 3, and now back to Shmuel, Vayom Yoav el HaMelech, V'yosef Hashem Elohecha el ha'am, kahem v'chahem me'at pamim ve'enei Adoni HaMelech la'od. So Yoav says, listen, God should increase Yosef Hashem Elokecha, right? God should increase you 100-fold. Yosef Hashem Elokecha, you also hear the beginning of the chapter. By Yosef Hashem lacharot b'Yisrael. So Yoav says, listen, God should bless you 100-fold. And you should see it. Why would you do this thing? So Yoav says to the king, bad idea. Don't take the census. What Yoav doesn't tell us is why. Why is it a bad idea to take the census? So there are two possibilities. One is, that's a political point he's making. Listen, the story is right after two rebellions. The great rebellion of Absalom, where most of Israel followed Absalom, and the rebellion of Sheva ben Bichri in chapter 20, where 10 tribes followed Sheva. They're not crazy about Sheva, but they don't like David. So there are two back-to-back rebellions. Each of them is quashed by Yoav. And Yoav says, listen, you want to make a statement, right? These are my people. That's what counting means. These are my people. Do yourself a favor. Don't make so many statements. Let it lie. That's one possibility. Don't make statements. Be grateful you're the king, even though most people don't really want you. So be grateful. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that it's a religious. You're not supposed to take a census. If you take a census in the Torah, through the half shekel. It's yesterday's Shabbat Shkolim, right? Yeah, it's timely. Shabbos Shkolim. Yes, every year this Shabbos Shkolim. Every year they donate money. It's taken, right. It's taken through the shekels. He's taken it without the shekels. And to take it with the shekels, it's not a matter of the shekels. The point of taking it through the shekels, in the Torah anyway, is taking it through the temple. What you're really saying is we are a people by virtue of the fact that we have a common God. That's the whole idea of the Mishkan being at the center. And you count the people via the Mishkan. But what David is doing is counting the people via himself. And I would add to this that we have other census in the book of Shmuel, like when you go to war. You have to know who the soldiers are, how many soldiers you have, etc., etc. But there's no war. So there's actually no reason for the census. And the guy who's talking to him is the commander-in-chief of his army. So, right? Yoav says, don't go there. Either on political grounds or on religious grounds. I'm not against you. God should bless you 100 times. But no, David insists. But interesting is the next word. Yes, go.
God told you to do it. So that's why I'm doing it.
God, because he doesn't know that God told him to do it. In enticing somebody, inciting somebody, you don't know you're being incited. Right. He put it in his head. I would say something like, God put in David's, if you want to explain it this way, God put in David's mind the possibility. It becomes a possibility. But it doesn't mean he's forcing him to do it. The choice is still David's choice. That's what it sounds like in the chapter, because there's no sense in the chapter whatsoever that David is innocent. David doesn't feel that way, and there's no sense of that. So, in any event, certainly David doesn't feel that way. And the next verse is very interesting with the first word. Vayechazak dvar hamelech o Yoav. Vayechazak. Remember, we already mentioned Paro. Vayechazek, right? Vayechazak. David insists. It commands Yoav and the others. And they leave and they count the people and describes the count. By the way, in the version in Chronicles, 2 of the tribes refuse to be counted. 2 will refuse to be counted. Binyamin is one. I think Levi is the other one. They won't be counted. So he doesn't have a complete count. So Divriyam has a little different story. But in our version, Yoav comes back to the king in verse number 9, and he tells them how many soldiers they have, etc. He gives the count to David. Now verse 10. Vayachlev David oto achrechen safaret ta'am. After he got the numbers, the count, David felt Vayachlev David oto. His heart, he was bothered by it. He reproached himself. He felt he had sinned after the count was taken. He realizes he did something wrong. Vayoma David el Hashem. And David turned to God and said, Chatati ma'od asher asiti. I have sinned greatly in what I did. V'yato Hashem haverna et avon avdecha ki niskalti ma'od. Oh God, please remove the sin of your servant, for I have been very foolish. So that's David's confession. The word that stands out in his 3-part confession is the little word ma'od, greatly. By contrast, if you remember in the story of Uriah Hittite, when the prophet says, when David gives him the parable of the poor lamb of the poor person, terrible thing, says David, terrible thing. That person should pay dearly with his life and pay for. And Nathan said, it's you, Atah ish. Vayoma David, chatati Hashem. And David says, I have sinned against God. He didn't say chatati ma'od. He said, I sinned against God. He didn't say niskalti ma'od. And there, by the way, he has to be told it. He doesn't realize it. That's him. Over here, David realizes it right away. Second, he gets the numbers, and here it's ma'od. I've sinned grievously. I have been very foolish. Sin is foolishness, and it's also sinfulness. So the question is, when you read this, and you can't forget the Uriah Hittite story, because it's the lead-in verse, you ask yourself the question, how could it be that the sin of Uriah Hittite is chatati, but the sin of taking a census is chatati ma'od? That is remarkable, actually. What kind of sense does that make? One of them are the big crimes, murder, adultery, murder. I mean, forget all the other stuff, the cover-up and the other stuff, which is terrible. But, okay, he took the census. This is ma'od. But this is the last chapter of the book. It's not just randomly here. This is a greater sin, actually.
Other people will die as a result of this.
Well, that's true, but he doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know yet. But the sin itself is greater. From this perspective. From the perspective of what the book's about, this is the worst sin. Because the issue in the book, it's not about what we think is better or worse. Obviously, objectively speaking, Uri Achiti's big crime. And this we say to ourselves, I'm not sure it's even listed in the entire mitzvot. I never seen it on the list. Not to count, I know, you know what I mean? But the point is, from the standpoint of the book, this is the crime. Because the issue in the book is a very simple issue. Shmuel said, you want a human king, but God is the king. God is your king. Why do you want a human king? In fact, human king is bad. It's idolatry. He's right. He's supplanting God. In other words, the point is, in the Torah, you count the people vis-a-vis God because they're God's people. What the king is saying over here, implicitly, if not explicitly, is, these are my people. I can count your money. It's mine. And that is supplanting God, actually. It's not just overreaching. The murder, the adultery is, I'm above the law. I can do whatever I want. That's overreaching. That's abuse of power. He uses the war to kill his own personal enemy, who's not really his enemy. It's his best friend. He doesn't realize that. But the point is, terrible thing. But this is much more direct. This is saying, in effect, these are my people. This is the ultimate crime in terms of the book, what the book's about. This is David realizes that. I've sinned grievously. I've been very foolish. God, I replaced you or tried to replace you. Terrible thing, terrible thing. David understands this very well. That's why it's the last chapter of the book. It gets back to the core issue of the book. Now let's see what God has to say about it. So here we're told, Vayachem David baboker. Gets up first thing in the morning. Udvar Hashem haya el God hanavi chosed David lemar. So God, G-O-D, sends God. The prophet's name is God. And God is, it says, David's seer, David's visionary. David has prophets in his court, to his credit. And then when they condemn him, he accepts it. Not so simple. He takes the criticism. Halach v'dibart el David. So God, Hashem, commands the prophet, go to David and say, Kol bar Hashem. This is what God is saying. Shalosh anochi notel alecha. I'm hanging over, I bring to you three things, three possibilities. B'char l'cha achat mehem v'yeselach. So choose one of them and I'll do it. That's what very strange. I give you a choice, A, B, or C, and whatever you choose, I will do. That's what you say to David. We'll see. It's certainly a punishment, but we'll see. Vayavo God el David vayaged lo. So God is vayaged. God is the one who's going to tell. God comes on the top of page 703, and he tells David. Vayamelo, he says the following. Hatavo l'cha sheva shanim ra'av bi'artzecha? Do you want 7 years of famine in your land? Im shlosha chodashim nuscha lefnei tzarecha v'hu rodfecha. 3 months running away from your enemy, tzarecha, your adversary, your enemy, who chases after you. V'yemeyot shloshet yamim dever bi'artzecha. Or do you want 3 days of plague, dever? Atod da'u re'eh. Now, says the prophet, know and see or choose. Here, probably means to choose. Know and choose. Mo'ashiv sholchi davar. What should I send back to the one who sent me? So before you get to David's answer, which is very, I would say first, the very way the question is phrased is basically a test. David's being tested of. Let's see if David passes the test. What do you think is the appropriate punishment for what you did? Now, what makes it very interesting is that we, the reader, pretty much know what the appropriate punishment is. We read it yesterday in Shul, actually. And that is, Torah says when you count the people, right? Each one should give a ransom for his soul, right? That's a dedication to the temple. Lo yiyeh bahem negef bifkod otam. There should be no negef when they are counted. Now, negef usually means a plague. It can sometimes mean war. But the point is, usually it means a plague. And over here, we basically know what it means. Because here, the way the verse is constructed, it plays on two words. The word for plague here is dever, but the other word is what I should say to the one who sent me, ma'ashiv shochi davar, which of course is written in the unvocalized Hebrew, and the Bible is unvocalized, daled bet resh. It's almost as if to say, what should I say to the one who sent me? Davar? There's an old, remember the old routine, Abbott and Costello? You ever see Abbott and Costello? For those, Niagara Falls. You ever see Niagara Falls? Niagara Falls, he's in jail. Costello's in jail, and he's with this guy, and he's, why are you here? Or they accuse me of this, and my wife was killed or something like this, and this took place on our honeymoon in that, what's that place again? He says, you mean Niagara Falls? So he goes crazy, Niagara Falls. He starts beating him, and then for the next 5 minutes or so, he tries to get him to say Niagara Falls. What's that place? I'm not going to say that. What are you not going to say? You know, it's a whole routine like that. It's over here the same thing. Tell me, what should I say? Ma'ashiv shochi davar, daled bet reish. Sound familiar? Now, what's interesting is that dever, we talked about paro. Dever is also a plague. In fact, not only is it a plague, it's a very important plague. Which plague is it? It's the fifth plague. Right. So when Moshe, remember when Moshe goes to Paro and he asked to go out to the desert for 3 days? And if, I don't want to go, Paro says, forget about it. And Moshe says, no. The God of the Hebrews has come to us and said to us, go and serve me in the desert. Pen yifka'enu ba'dever o ba'cherev. Lest he smite us with dever or cherev. Now the point that I make in my Haggadah, actually, dever and cherev, that dever is the fifth plague. Cherev is the 10th plague, death, right? So the point is, the plagues are divided into two groups. They're divided in several ways, but one is 5 and 5. So the plague of dever is like the luchos, there are 10 of them. It's 5 and 5. Now when you look at dever, you see something very interesting about dever. First of all, let's find the plague of dever. We've already made reference to Paro. And if you see the plague of dever, dever is found, where is dever? Dever is found on page 129. It's chapter 9 of Shemot. 129. Right. Verse number 2, right, verse number 3. If you refuse to let them go, Hineyad Hashem hoyab b'miknecha Hashem basodeh, basusim, bachamorim, bagmalim, babakar, vatzon, dever koveid ma'ot. If you don't let them go, the hand of God will smite your cattle, your livestock. Dever koveid ma'ot. V'yifla Hashem bein miknei Yisrael uvein miknei Mitzrayim, v'lo yamut b'kol livnei Yisrael davar. And God will distinguish between Israel and Egypt. From Israel, none will die at all. Lo yamut davar. Vayasem Hashem moed leimar. God set an appointed time, moed. Remember that. Machar yaseh Hashem hadavar hazeh ba'aretz. So you have, in the case of dever, 3 interesting features. First of all, the Chumash itself plays with dever and davar. You have dalet bet reish 3 times, once dever and twice davar. That's number 1. Number 2, it's the only plague, barring the last plague, only the first 9 plagues that talks about God's hand. And you could check this out for yourself. You'll see only dever is Yad Hashem. And number 3, there is set an appointed time, an 8th moed. Now let's remember that because all of those 3 features appear right over here. Right here with David. Let's see, you have a choice of 3 things. So we know what the right choice is. And I would also add something else, that Rav, famine, that we get ready in chapter 21. Running away from your enemy is the story of David's life. So let's try something new. You know what I mean? We haven't had plague yet. You know, it's time for a good plague over here. The fact is, it's got to be Deborah. The Chumash says Deborah, basically. It says Magefa, Negev is Deborah. So let's see what David says. So what does David say? This is found in Pasuk, where's this Pasuk? Okay. Vayomer David 14. Vayomer David, oh God, Sari Ma'od. So David said to God, I am very distressed. Sari Ma'od. This verse is, the Ashkenazim say this before Tachanun. Nipuana biyad Hashem ki rabim rachamav. Uviyad adam awepoa. Let me fall into the hand of God, but not into the hand of the human being. Notice immediately the expression Yad Hashem. And I would say more than that. What is David actually saying? Some of the Mefarshim say something that I don't accept. I don't think it's right. Tell you what I think is right here. It's obvious, I think. What does David choose? He's given three choices, A, B, and C. What does he choose?
Let's God choose.
No. He eliminates B. He eliminates B, which is Nuschal of Tzarecha. And David says, Tsar li ma'od. I don't want to be in the hands of a human being. I'd rather be in your hands. But I'm not choosing which way in your hands. It leaves it open for God to choose, which is A or C. And in doing so, he passes the test. Because that actually is the test. Because the prophet says, listen, someone sent me, boss man, he wants to know what the king wants to do. You know, you tell the guy who sent me what to do. You tell him what to do. And the guy who sent him is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know? So David says the right answer. The right answer is no. God makes the choices. Remember that in the Chumash, the king is the one that God chooses. You want a king like all the nations, forget about that. The king that you will have is Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha, the one that God is choosing. So he passed the first part, the two-part test. Part one he's passed. Yes, Micah.
I'm just wondering if there's any connection to the choices that were made in the other story, where it shows who died, and there he made the choice.
Which other story are you talking about?
Samuel. When he's choosing
Oh.
7.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but that is a very good point. And yes, his point is very good. His point is, it's a point that I made last time in conjunction with 21. The point I made about chapter 21 is that it is related to chapter 20. Because in chapter 20, the woman from Avel Mecholah, when Sheva ben Bichri takes refuge in the city, and she says, and Yoav is there with the armies besieging the city, and the woman stands on the wall. There he gets close to the wall, actually. He's not afraid to get close to the wall. And the woman says, why will you destroy a city in Israel? Oh, no. We're not destroying a city in Israel. There's one particular person, Sheva ben Bichri, who's a rebel against the king. If you hand him over to us, we'll spare the city. So she goes back into the town. They kill Sheva, and they throw his head over the wall, and Yoav leaves the city. My point is that story is a story that the Gemara, Yerushalmi in Trumos, has a debate, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What happens when the non-Jews, or let's say the army, surrounds the city and says, give us one person to kill, and if you don't give us a person to kill, we'll kill everybody. What do you do in such a case? So that guy, the person you're going to hand over will die anyway, but are you permitted to make that choice? So the Gemara has a disagreement. Everybody says if they give us one person and just indiscriminately, you can't make the choice. That's on the books. You can't make that choice. By the way, can someone volunteer is an interesting question. But you can't make the choice. That's a whole interesting question. Can you volunteer for that? Can't make the choice. But if they single the person out, then according to one view, you can make the choice. You can give that person over. The other view says even if they single the person out, you can't give the person over. Only if they single the person out and the person is guilty in some sense. And this is the story of Sheva ben Bichri. That's chapter 20. In chapter 21, with the Givonim, the point is, and we made this point last time, that what do you want? Kill 7 of Saul's sons, and David chooses which ones to kill. So David is acting in 21 in contrast to chapter 20. The Micah says over here, it's interesting because here, essentially the test is will he make that choice? And David...
7 were that he died.
What?
Are the 7 that he chose his word that he...
Well, that's a good question. The question is, from our perspective today, no, because we don't go, and that's just our perspective, way the text of the Bible, Yechezkel. Yirmiyahu has this a bit as well. We don't follow the idea that children die for the sins of their parents. But in this text that we have in chapter 21, Saul in the bloody house, it sounds like there's some justification. Okay. It sounds to me also that David shouldn't have gone down that path. But that's another story. What do you want to say?
The three choices, what strikes me is the first and the last one affect the people, but the middle one only.
Okay, so that's a very good question. Many have raised that question. It strikes me that, I will say that I hear what you're saying, and others have said the same thing. I don't think it actually means that, though. I think if the king is running away from his enemies, I think it presupposes not a situation where David runs from Saul. Even David was Saul, his men are in danger. But if the king of Israel is being chased by the enemies, it's then never just the king. Even the story of Avshalom, there are two armies, basically. So when the king goes, he has a whole retinue, he has a whole army, he has a whole infrastructure. So I think it means war. I don't think it means him personally. Others have suggested what you say. My view is not so. My view is actually it's war, and he doesn't want that. So David doesn't choose. God will choose. Fine. So now, Vayitein Hashem dever b'Yisrael me'aboker v'yad 8 moed. We could have written this ourselves. You know what I mean? Me'aboker v'yad 8 moed. It's exactly the language of dever. It's in my Haggadah. I'll tell you why I talk about Haggadah. It's one of the better things in Haggadah too. Vayomet min ha'am midon v'yad Beersheva sheva shivim elef ish. 70,000 people die. Vayishlach. Vayishlach. One second. So, right. So, Haboker at 8 moed is the phrase we have in Plague of Dever. Moed is there. So Dever Davar is here. Moed is here. Yad Hashem is here. They're all here. The point I made in the Haggadah, actually, this story is in the Haggadah of Pesach, but not the verse from here. The point I made in the Haggadah is that the Haggadah has drushes on the 4 psukim. So b'yad chazaka uvizroa netuya. So what does the Haggadah say? Ubiyad chazaka zehadever. K'moshe Ne'emar. They quote the verse. Yad Hashem hoya b'miknecha Hashem asadeh. So susik b'ayim chamer. Dever koved ma'od. Yad Hashem is dever. Uvizroa netuya. So acherev. K'moshe Ne'emar. V'charbo shalufa biyado netuya al Yerushalayim. The sword was outstretched, right, over Jerusalem. Where's that verse from? I tell you, the more I think about what I said, the more I like it. I got to tell you the truth. Not even what I'm going to say now, but it's just reminding somebody else I said, which I think is very true about the Haggadah. So maybe for Pesach. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, where's that verse from? That verse is from Chronicles. It's from the story here. The same story. But the story here doesn't mention an angel with an outstretched sword. But the story in Chronicles has the angel killing the 70,000 with an outstretched sword. Here, it says in verse 17, in 17. Let's go back a bit. In verse 17, the 16 is good. Vayishlach yado hamalach Yerushalayim l'shachata. The angel put his hand. There you have yad also. But the point is, you don't have charbo shufa b'yado netuya. So netuya is only in divrei hayamim. So zoa netuya zoa cherev. Now, by the way, what's interesting is, what does it mean zoa cherev? So I presume that the first dever is the first 5 plagues. Penifkeinu b'dever o b'cherev. The cherev is the 10th plague. Makat b'chorot. How did they die in Makat b'chorot? What is that Haggadah suggesting? Dever. They die of dever. In other words, the difference of Makat b'chorot means cherev. There's no cherev. Makat b'chorot is not a sword. Makat b'chorot is an illness, basically. And the fact is, you see from Divrei Hayamim that they're calling dever cherev because they die with dever, right? So the point is, in any event, the point I made in the Haggadah about the drasha, there are 2 points. One I can't get into now, but the point about relevant here is the following. What the drasha is doing, actually, you have a Seder. There are good guys and the bad guys, you know? The bad guys are obvious. The 2 real bad guys is Paro, bad guy number 1. And the other bad guy in the drushes, of course, is Lavan. He's even worse than Paro, you know. We can't get into the whole Haggadah now, but Lavan, they're the bad guys. And we're the victims. That's true. But then you start reading the drushes. And the drusha is an invitation. The drusha is not about a line. This is a very important point about the study of Bible in general. What they call intertextuality, whether that's the precise word or not is irrelevant. But what intertextuality is actually about, and stuff we do here, it's an invitation to read the other story. It's not about one word or two words or three words or four words. What the Midrash is saying is, you got to read these stories together. One story informs the other. Now the point is, when you read this story of David taking the census, and when the Dever, you read about Dever, and you immediately jump to Dever, which is the fifth plague, by Yechazak David, by Yoset, all that. You say to yourself, very simple, you know, there are good kings and there are bad kings. A king who wants to supplant God is a bad king. That's what Paro is all about. Paro wants them to serve Paro. God wants them to serve God. Shalach ami v'yavduni. Paro says, what are you talking about? Tichbada avodah. They have to work for me. That's the fight. Says the Medrash. You think only Paro's the bad guy. Our greatest heroes could be exactly the same. Take, for example, David HaMelech. Now, David is almost Paro. Shlomo Mamish is Paro, by the way, in Sefer Malachim. But David comes close. And what distinguishes David from Paro, the impulse, the desire for power is the same. But what makes David the hero of this story, actually, is the ability to step back. And actually, David confesses. And the confession here is central. And Paro says several times, pray for me, pray for me, pray for me. I sinned, I sinned, I sinned. Repeats the same thing every single time. And not only that, as we'll see, if we get there today, he says chatasi, but he doesn't mean it, or he doesn't act on it. And not only that, but the key word in Paro's chatasis, it appears here in the story. We'll get there. It already appeared in chapter 21. It appears here prominently in chapter 24. I had other things to say about that, but I can't get into. That's really the Seder issue, which is extraordinarily interesting. Anyway, the point is, okay, let's get back to what we have over here. So fine. So this is, yeah. Yeah. Yes. All right. They have to do an autopsy on this. Now they can do amazing things with DNA stuff and the computers they have. It's amazing. They can. Anyway, okay. So now, Vayishlach Yado Hamalach Yerushalayim Ushachata Vayinachim Hashem El Hara'ah. What time is it now, by the way?
7 more minutes.
It's 11:25. Okay, we have to continue. But next time we'll continue. Maybe just a little more. Wait. Vayishlach Yado Hamalach Ushachata. Vayinachim Hashem El Hara'ah. Vayomer Hamalach HaMashchit V'am Rav Atoheref Yodecha. U'malach Hashem Haya Im Goren Arav Na'ivusi. So the angel is above, stretched out his hand. L'shloach yad often means to harm. Shlichut yad is often harm, usually harm. Megillah appears many times. Pen yishlach yado v'yachal me'etzach. He's acting in an appropriate way. Take what you shouldn't be taking. So the God says to the angel, Malach HaMashchit, by the way. Where else do we have in the Bible Malach HaMashchit? No, not in the Megillah. Where do you have Malach HaMashchit? Who knows? Not in the Megillah. There's no Malach in the Megillah. What? Makas Bechoros. Right? V'lo yitain HaMashchis lavo batechem lingov. It's another connection. The story is playing with Dever and Cherev, actually. Makas Bechoros. Anyway, so the angel is above. We'll have to stop at this point. The angel is above the threshing floor of Arav Nahayevusi. Now, Yevus, we know Yevus is Jerusalem. David captures Yevus in chapter 5 of 2 Samuel. Yevus is Jerusalem. Appears also in Pilegesh by Giva. That's the city they don't want to go to because it's, And the place they go, there's an angel above the Goren of Aravna Hayevusi. Now, Aravna is a not non-Jew, a Yevusi, but his name is very interesting. His name is Aleph Reish Vav Nun Hey Aravna. And when you look at the word Aravna, right smack in the middle of the word, you have the word Aron. Now, next time we'll have a shir on the rest of this chapter, which is one of the more interesting things. But here's the interesting thing about the Ark. The Ark is a central feature of the book of Samuel. There are some academics many years ago, and who knows what they still believe, they talk about a separate Ark narrative. We have absolutely no evidence that this thing, an Ark narrative exists, but that doesn't stop them. There's no separate Ark narrative. That maybe there is, but no one has a clue. It's nonsense. The point is, no. The Ark is interwoven into the book, and the book begins with the Ark. Right in the beginning of the book, which is destruction of Shiloh, the Ark is captured, never to return to Shiloh. Then the Ark is shunted aside. Then David tries to bring the Ark to Jerusalem. At first he fails, then he succeeds. And now what this is about is the Ark finding its permanent place. We have a name for that. It's called the Beis Hamikdash, or Har HaMoriah. Now, the book of Shmuel never mentions Har HaMoriah. The book of Chronicles does. That's because the artistry of the book of Samuel is 20 levels above the book of Chronicles. It doesn't have to say it. It's so subtle, but it's clear. Now the question is, what is this about? So this interesting thing is, just to leave with a thought, the angel is above this place, over Jerusalem, to destroy it, and God calls out to the angel, Heref Yodecha, hold back your hands. Vayishlach Yodo. Of course, everybody who reads this immediately, Al Tishlach Yodcha Lanar V'Atas Lo Ma'uma, what jumps to mind immediately, of course, is the Akedah, and the question is, what is the significance? How significant is it? Answer, deeply significant. And this is an insight into the book of Shmuel. And if you don't see this insight, you will say things like, these 4 chapters have no relationship. And you won't understand the ending. You understand nothing, actually. But once you see it, I remember seeing this thing, I was happy for a week, and see this, because once you see it, it's obvious, the way the book is being written. It's one of the great chapters of the Bible. So here David comes out. Here's David, the great hero, actually. David is the ideal king in this chapter. It is true that the book of Shmuel, in many places, presents him as a deeply flawed and problematic person. What's interesting about the book is that it presents us also with the other side of what he's capable of. Now here's the thing. I'm not going to be here next week. I will add a class at the end. Whenever I'll add the class, I have to be in Israel. I have to some personal stuff and you started yeshiva in Israel, so it's I want to go to the yeshiva there and see what's going on there. Okay, what is the yeshiva? I'll say in 2 minutes what the yeshiva is and why it's important. What I believe to be true. The yeshiva, it's called the yeshiva, which in Israel is a big deal to call for women. In Israel, to call it a yeshiva is like a tzachaki, everything's a yeshiva. In Israel, yeshiva is yeshiva for men. The only women's place of study that's a yeshiva is the Drisha's yeshiva. And at the core of the yeshiva is the study of Talmud, actually. There's more Talmud study than any other place by far, 2-3 times as much. And it has a lot of the elements of yeshiva, a lot of your own personal learning. There's constant talking to the students, see if they're progressing. The head of it is Rosh Yeshiva is Chana Dreyfus. And here's what I believe. So why is it important? There's a lot of good things that's happened, in my view, over the last several years. I think recognizing women for what they do. I like the idea of women rabbis, which was Maharad actually was the first. Others picked it up. It's not about the particular people. It's about the statement. I think that's all positive. There's some work being happened. People are trying to solve this Aguna problem, which is good. Here's what I believe. Until you're in a situation where the people that matter, and the people that matter are the male Rosh Yeshiva and the male Rabbanim. I don't mean the American-style rabbis either. I mean the Rabbanim and the Rosh Yeshiva. Sit down at a table, and there are 10 of them sitting there, and there are 10 women on their level. You'll never get any place. It's all patchwork stuff. And the moment that the men respect the women as equals in learning, everything will suddenly change. All your problems will change. And until that point happens, you'll never fix the problem. And the only place in the world that's going to do it is us. It's not happening tomorrow either. It will take years to do this. 7 years is my 7 years. We have Chana Dreyfus is good. They had recently had a conference in New York, the Aguna conference, Rabbi Krauss and this and that. 16 men and 2 women. 1 woman academic and Chana Dreyfus at Rosh Hashiva. And until you get 10 and 10 in the room, you can forget about making any real progress. Not that we shouldn't try with all these other things. It's very nice, but you can only solve the problem because in the world, in the deeply committed world, what matters is learning, and the definition of learning for them is actually Gemara. I myself, I taught Gemara for years, and I basically do biblical narrative. And I like what I do. I think it's pretty good. It doesn't matter. That's not going to solve the problem. Women who know Shas and who are respected as equals, as peers, that's what the yeshiva is about. If you want to invest in something, if you care about this issue, that's the place to invest your money, by the way. The yeshiva. Stop here. What?
If any of you are going to Israel, take a half a day out and visit the yeshiva, and you'll understand that the enthusiasm just expressed by Rabbi Silber is very real. It's very sincere and serious students.
Yeah.
Very good learning.
Right. It's in Rosh Turim. It's in the Gush. All right, we'll stop here.